All right, welcome back to another episode of Riders Block. Good show this week, and kind of an exciting show in some ways because it is game week. New Mexico kicks off on Saturday at 2 p.m. against FCS Power, the number 4 FCS team in the country in the preseason poll, Montana State. We will have tons of coverage from the game, plenty of coverage leading in, from position previews to stories from Bronco Mendenhall's Monday presser to a couple other items that we'll be releasing by the time this podcast gets out. Before we hop into our interview with 406 MT Montana State beat writer Victor Flores, I did want to mention the fact that Jeff Grammer and I are doing a new post-game show. We're hosting it on Twitter Live, X Live, and YouTube Live as well. We'll be holding it probably about an hour after the Montana State game ends on Saturday, so be sure to look out for that. We did one earlier this week. It seemed like folks liked it. Jeff and I definitely rambled, but we'll be covering the the kind of post-game effects and all that, and things that we heard, things that we saw, and whether the Lobos won or lost in that post-game show. So if you like this podcast, definitely be sure to check that out. Other than that, enjoy this interview with 406 MT Sports' Victor Flores. All right, well, today I am very happy to be joined by Victor Flores, 406 MT Sports, Montana State beat writer for them. He does great work. I've been able to follow it. I've been following it a lot since we knew that they were playing Montana State this year. I just want to start with this, Victor. Under head coach Brent Vigen, and amid a lot of success that Montana State has had under him, they have played and lost to 2 FBS teams. I believe it was Wyoming in 2021 and Oregon State in 2022. They get another crack this Saturday, obviously. With that in mind, how are Montana State players and coaches kind of treating this game and opportunity?
Yeah, some of the players have been very kind of upfront or honest about, this, we want to win this game. Like some of them have even said, tape out there against FBS players for potential pro opportunities is important. So, and they have a couple guys for sure who have a chance to make the NFL. So, it's been cool to see them be honest about that. And so I think there's a little more motivation there. Brent Vigen, he didn't say any, he didn't kind of go that far. I think he did the very kind of coach speak, hey, we're just, it's an opportunity and it's a good team kind of thing. But I think, there's definitely a sense, and he didn't totally evade or say, oh, it's just another game. I think he knows that it is a little bit bigger of a stage, obviously, with FS1 and week 0 and playing on the road. And, I'm sure internally they want to win every game, but this means a little bit more than some of these lower level FCS or even non-FCS opponents that they'll face in the future weeks.
I was a little shocked. I was looking back and trying to find the last time Montana State beat an FBS team, and I was surprised the most recent time was 2006. I think they won 19-10 against Colorado. For fans, does it mean something much more in some ways to, from that perspective, to beat an FBS team?
Oh, no question. I mean, I haven't polled all the fans, but I don't think there's, I've seen enough of the message board or if Twitter comments or whatever it may be to know that this means more for sure. I mean, it doesn't mean as much as playoff games or the rivalry game or anything like that, but and certainly if they could beat a Power 5 team when they faced Oregon State a couple of years ago, if they could have won that game against a really good Oregon State team, obviously that's a different level than a struggling FBS in the Mountain West. But I think everybody would, and they'd love to get that drought ended too. It is kind of crazy to be one of the best FCS teams and not have that many FBS wins, especially because a lot of their peers have FBS wins recently. Montana, their arch rival, beat Washington 3 years ago, a Pac-12 team that was ranked at the time. So they would love to at least have one kind of close to that level.
Mm-hmm. And, during Monday's presser, first of the season, all that, Bronco Mendenhall, who spent a lot of time recently in Montana before coming back into coaching, he made a point to mention just how flat-out experienced and seasoned Montana State is. I believe they're bringing back, correct me if I'm wrong, 23 seniors. I think there's 13 right now listed on the depth chart between the offense and the defense. Wanted to kind of start with one of them, a real key cog for them. Quarterback Tommy Mellott, been really successful in his time at Montana State. And it looks like he's the guy after kind of, dealing with injuries last year and kind of splitting time and season before that What have you seen out of Malott, and what can fans expect when Malott comes to University Stadium this Saturday?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's a expectation that he's going to run a lot from most people, and this is probably the first year where it's maybe a little in question as far as how much he'll run. They've talked about being more balanced. As you mentioned, he's dealt with injuries really his entire career. He burst onto the scene in the FCS playoffs in 21. Kind of was barely a quarterback. Was playing special teams. Was playing receiver. A lot of us thought he would redshirt before the season. He playing all these different positions. He's wildcat quarterback, but really not a full-time quarterback. Replaces the starter going into the playoffs after their rivalry loss, and then lights the world on fire. Throws pretty well, even though he's mostly a runner. But then gets hurt in the title game against North Dakota State. He gets hurt for a few games, 22. Gets hurt for a few games last year, including at the end of the North Dakota State loss in the playoffs. So he's constantly been hurt, and of course, a lot of people blame it on the running. I think it's a little more complicated than just, hey, he runs a lot. But certainly that doesn't help, and it's a riskier strategy than just having him throw. So I think they want him now that he is not doing this 2 QB system with Sean Chambers, who graduated and is actually now a assistant coach for Montana State. He graduated last year or lost his eligibility last year. So now that he's the guy, and truly, by all accounts, there's not going to be much of a backup plan, as far as somebody coming in during non-garbage time minutes, unless Malott gets hurt. So, and the Cats have a lot of really strong receivers, tight ends, guys that are promising as far as being able to catch the ball, and they have a stable of running backs and a really good offensive line. So I think he doesn't need to do as much for them to be successful. So I think you'll see a lot of passes and handoffs in this game, but don't be surprised, of course, if there's some read option plays where he's keeping it and he's showing off his speed.
And a little more on the offense. I mean, last year, Montana State had far and away one of the best, maybe the best offenses in FCS. I think they averaged just a shade under 40 points per game. And a big part of it is what they did on the ground. Really, really successful rushing team, absolute force to defend. For those that haven't seen it, I mean, how would you describe Montana State's offense?
Yeah, really, really, really hard to stop on the ground. There have been games where it just seems like they can run almost the same play or the same version of plays, even against good defenses. And they're just, again, with Malott and when Chambers was there the last couple of years, it was just, okay, they'll do this read option and good luck trying to stop one of the 2 really good runners, especially behind a bunch of good blockers. Of course, some of the blockers have changed over the last couple of years, and it might not be quite as strong as it has been. It could be just as strong, if not stronger too. So it's hard that's one of the mysteries or uncertainties going into this one. But certainly the run offense and the scheme too. It's not so much even just that they have huge hogs that are open at holes. There's the outside zone that they kind of switched to a couple of years ago has really, really worked for their kind of athletic offensive linemen, and they just are able to create space almost just schematically as much as they are physically, even though physically they also are, and they have just so much speed in the backfield that it's just really hard to stop, especially when your quarterback. And I think that's why it's tough to say Malott won't run that much, because that's his best skill, and the offense pretty much only really works if the quarterback is a threat to keep it, and he's one of the fastest players on the team, so he will definitely do that. So and then I think the receivers. I think they're going to try some shorter stuff this year, at least, try to mix in some more shorter stuff. They often threw a lot of deep balls, kind of more go balls, jump balls even, to kind of, if the box is stacked and there's, they have their strong receivers on an island. So that probably won't go away, but I think they might try to diversify the pass game a little bit more than they have.
Yeah, and in terms of the offense, I believe Montana State had a coordinator change too. Taylor Housewright, I'm pretty sure, was the offensive coordinator before, and then he took the Akron OC job, ended up not taking it and kind of stepping back from football. Has there been any meaningful change with the offense with the new coordinator? I believe it's the promoted quarterbacks coach. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but has there been any change?
Yeah, Tyler Walker's the new offensive coordinator. He was the tight ends coach last couple of years. And then there was kind of a whole shift with Chucky Keaton, former Utah State star, who was the quarterback coach. He left for a job with Seattle Seahawks. So then they moved Walker, who was still staying at tight ends coach while also being the offensive coordinator. then they moved him to offensive coordinator or to QB's coach. So kind of a whole bunch of things. But yeah, Housewright was there. He took a job. Now he's with Georgia Southern. He was going to take the Akron job, but yeah. To answer your question, I don't think there's going to be too much of a change. Again, I think they do want to run the quarterback read option kind of plays. Maybe a little less QB power, just because they used to do that quite a bit, especially with Chambers, with trying to get short yardage and goal line stuff. And again, I think they probably learned, especially because that's how Malak got hurt on the last play of last season, that maybe that's not the smartest play, especially early in the season. So maybe a little less of that, but they didn't do that much of that. It was really a lot of just read option. And I think there will be a bunch of that. But like I said, a little bit more short passing, maybe getting the tight ends a little bit more involved than in the past, and relying on their really good receivers. Lanyata Alexander Jr. is a Washington transfer. He also was at Arizona State for a little bit. Ty McCullough is a Colorado State transfer who played really well last year in limited time. And Alexander was out with an eligibility issue last year, the whole season. So he's back, and both guys look really dynamic. And I think, again, some of the maybe shorter passes, slants, things like that might be a little bit more common. But again, from what they've said, and we haven't seen, of course, what it's going to look like in a game. But from what they said, there won't be too many massive changes by any means.
I'm sure you were kind of maybe had the same feeling on Monday, right before or after the press conference, kind of getting the first look at the official two deep and all that. At least it was the first official one for us. Kind of going through and reading some of your stuff, notice one kind of notable name missing, running back Julius Davis, former Wisconsin transfer. I believe he's been ruled out for the first game, and sophomore Scott Trey Humphrey is listed as a starter on the depth chart. And starter on the depth chart for running backs is maybe a little bit different with all the rotations and all that compared to other positions. But obviously, good running back depth for Montana State. But does the fact that Davis since Davis is going to be out, do you think that'll make an impact?
It won't. They'd rather have him, no question. But this team is amazing. It's like, if any position is one that you're not concerned about, it's that one. And 2 years ago was a great example where they went into Oregon State, in fact, with one healthy running back. Actually, among they had 6 running backs, and one of them was healthy. A bunch of guys got hurt, and so they ended up running him, and then turning a wide receiver into running back, and then even doing a lot of 2 QB out on the field at the same time. They ran for 200 something yards on Oregon State, a good defense, and they were able to move the ball against them, and they did that kind of all season with limited running backs. So it's kind of amazing what they can do with limited guys. So with 5 guys healthy, and Humphrey is excellent. He's big and he can move. The backup Adam Jones is only a redshirt freshman, but he's been really impressive, and they've raved about him in fall. So I would expect him to shine pretty well too. But then Jared White has been excellent every time he's touched the ball in his couple of years, and he's not on the depth chart, but he was kind of the one we all expected to be 1 or 2 on the depth chart. So I would expect him to be in there, and he's kind of just like Humphrey a little bit, not as big, but can run pretty fast. He's pretty powerful. And then Elijah Elliott has kind of been the guy that has been down the depth chart, but anytime he gets in, he's really dynamic and is fast and pretty strong. So Davis is a mean runner. He hurdles guys all the time. He trucks guys. He's nobody can really replace him totally. But if there's one position that MSU will kind of never worry about under Vegan, it's probably that one.
And another notable absence also on the offense, and this one on the offensive line, all Big Sky center Justice Perkins is also out. I think Vegan said, referred to it in the story as it's the most concerning thing in terms of an injury that's been sustained during fall camp. I believe that's Cole Sane stepping in at center. Is that something to kind of look out for and kind of pay attention to during the game?
Yeah, so definitely. And that might be the most concerning for position and issue that they run into on Saturday, because it's not just Cole Sane or not just Justice Perkins who's out, but likely or a good chance that JT Reed, who was a starter 2 years ago and missed most of last season with the injury, he was supposed to be one of the guards, and he's out. And so they're putting in some kind of more inexperienced guys, a couple inexperienced guys, likely Burke Mastel at guard and Titan Fleischman at right tackle, with move in Marcus Weir, who's an All-American and probably a future NFL roster, or at least get a look in the NFL type of guy. He's now at right guard, so the offensive line is reshuffled, and they have depth there, and there's a lot of reason to feel like they're going to continue to roll. But Perkins has started every game of his career, or every game since he's been able to play since 2021. And so he's been a rock there, never had a bad snap in a game that I can recall, which is important. It's a little hard to know if Sane is going to be able to do that, since we haven't really seen him in game action snapping the ball. And of course, if they're snapping all over the yard, that's not what you want against an FBS team. So that's probably the thing I'm not watching much. I think the blocking should be okay. But again, a lot of questions, especially because Sane has been dealing with injuries for the last 2 years as well.
This is, I'll be honest, I mean, Montana State's one of the most fun teams for me. It's been one of the most fun teams for me to go back and watch the tape from last year. One of the guys that I really loved watching was tight end Trayton Pickering. Really impressed me. I think he was all Big Sky as well, but I believe he exhausted his eligibility and isn't with the team anymore. I know Montana State added Rohan Jones and all that, but I'm seeing Ryan Lonergan listed as kind of the starting tight end on the two deep. What are the tight ends looking like heading into this first game?
Yeah, and Jones is actually listed as the starting fullback, but that's a little. It's not your typical kind of Mike Allstott type of fullback, where it's just a big guy who's running, opening up holes. It's more of a H-back type. Derek Snell was filled that role the last couple of years, and he is one of the most fun players to watch. Him and Pickering were both really fun as far as like just being able to lay guys out and catch the ball and move pretty well. And so that H-back fullback position is a little bit of a tight end fullback hybrid. So you'll see Jones probably getting a lot of looks at, or running a lot of routes, getting maybe some shorter passes and even longer ones, but also kind of serving that fullback blocking role. So so they kind of have two tight ends, and they'll mix and match. Sometimes they put one out there. Just depends on what the formation is like, or they have in the past at least. So and Lonergan is kind of your more prototypical tight end, big, can catch the ball, move the chains, isn't gonna outrun you necessarily, but can block and can pass or catch the ball pretty well. But Jones is supposed to be really dynamic, coming over from Maine, and I expect him he could be a guy that really shines, shows off his speed and strength this season.
Flipping over to defense, there's a good amount of standouts, but none quite like Brody Grebe. I hope I'm pronouncing Grebe right. Grebe, thank you. Montana State, I mean, finished second in FCS and team sacks last year for like 41, I think is the number. Grebe had 9.5 of them on his way to All-American honors. How worried should UNM fans be about Grebe come Saturday?
Well, the fact that they have to replace their entire offensive line, if I have that correct,
yes,
that's where I think if Montana State fans are worried, I think that's the one side that they should be optimistic, is that Grebe is just, I mean, he's one of the probably top 3 guys on the team that will get NFL looks. A freak athlete who just ever since his freshman year has been able to pressure the quarterback and get sacks. And last year was really his breakout as far as the numbers. But he's just a really fantastic player, and can get pressure, can stop the run, is a FBS level talent. If he didn't grow up in tiny Melstone, Montana, I don't know if he grew up in a bigger town, went to some camps, some showcases, I think he's in the FBS and maybe in the Power 5. And if he wanted to transfer, he would have a lot of suitors. So he's a guy that I think will, if nobody else, will really shine and look like maybe the best player on the field. And then on the other side, they have Kenneth Iden IV, who might even have better numbers this year just because everybody's going to focus on Grebe. And Iden has just done nothing but pressure the quarterback his entire career, which is now in its 3rd season of really significant playing time. So, both guys, especially against, depending on how those offensive linemen are, those guys should have pretty good success. But again, it's hard to know what that offensive line on New Mexico side looks like.
Yeah, no, I mean it's entirely made up of transfers, and it's relatively experienced transfers. But I mean it is just this Saturday will be the first time they've all played together in a game, and so you kind of don't totally know. But at linebacker, Montana State lost last year's leading tackler, I believe, and Nolan Askelson, but they bring back seniors and Danny. I think it's Ulu. How do you pronounce the last name?
Olulia Kepa or La Kepa.
Lulia Kepa. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. The Mike and then Makeda O'Reilly at the will. What have they brought to the defense so far, and how have you seen them kind of maybe take leadership?
Yeah, and I don't even know if I pronounced it right, so that is a tougher one. Olulia Kepa, I believe. So it's around there. It is a little harder to say, but no, he's been a 2-time captain. His second year as a captain. Really, just a solid player. Just kind of can hit hard. He's had some really bone crushing hits. So he's just a guy that kind of captains the defense and always seems to be in the right place and is able to do his job really well. Same with O'Reilly and. O'Reilly kind of really got his first playing time last year, or his first significant playing time, and was kind of considered a third starter. They have a 4-2-5 defense, so the two linebackers, but they rotate in. They've rotated in a third guy pretty frequently throughout Vigen's tenure. So O'Reilly's pretty experienced, and he's a pretty seamless fit there at the starter. But Askelson was he was a really good player. I do think that's one guy with O'Reilly and Ululia Kepa that they should be able to be decent there, just because, they've both been pretty solid in the past. But, I think both are, maybe not the most especially at a school that had Troy Anderson, who's now at the Atlanta Falcons and was a 2nd-round pick. They're not going to flash their speed and strength quite like he did, but really just solid kind of leaders of the defense.
And then a very experienced secondary. I believe one of the key guys, Rylan Ork, kind of coming back at strong safety. I think he's a senior as well. Mm-hmm. What can fans expect out of this secondary when they take the field on Saturday?
Yeah, Ork's kind of another captain of the defense. He's an actual team captain as well. And, just a really pretty big guy. He big enough to play linebacker probably, but kind of just does everything well, is able to just those three guys. Yeah, it's hard to even say what they do well. They just kind of do everything pretty well. They're not maybe again the fastest or the hardest hitting, although Ululia Kepa it can really lay the wood. They all can, of course, but yeah, those three are just really just solid. They're never going to kind of be out of place. And Ord has been kind of a rock, especially last year when they dealt with so many injuries. Drew Polidor was really good at the free safety spot last year, but he's out with an injury. So Blake Stillwell filled in well, and I think he should be pretty solid. And then at the nickel spot, Caden Dowler and Miles Jackson both. Caden Dowler, I think, is a guy who could really break out and be kind of an all-conference type guy at nickel, and he's also rotating at free safety, so he might get some looks there throughout the season. But those guys are all pretty solid. And then I think John Johnson and Simeon Woodard are both really solid at cornerback. And Woodard was a guy who really broke out as a true freshman and just kind of been dealing with injuries, but he's a guy who could be an all-conference type if he can just stay a little healthier.
With all this in mind, I mean, a ton coming back on offense, although maybe some questions about the offensive line if some injuries can't get sorted out, and a ton coming back on defense. I mean, what are your expectations at this point for Montana State this season?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're maybe definitely top 4 in the FCS. And I think this is kind of the year that if they're going to win a national championship, this is probably as good as it's been under Vigen, and one of the best setups for them with all the returning talent with the senior class. Like you said, there's a bunch of them and they're all extremely talented. You've got top end talent, you've got depth, you've got all these different just leadership. I mean, everything that can kind of fit, with a championship team. And, and they're mad about how last season ended. They're really mad about that. Losing in the second round to North Dakota State, who they've been trying to beat for, even before Brent Vigen was there. And, so and they lost in overtime in the block PAT. So that really left a terrible taste in their mouth. And they lost 4 games and they were expecting to be a national title contender. I mean, they made the title game in Brent Vigen's first season, and they made the semifinals the next season when they were a little ahead of schedule and young. And most of the guys who are seniors now were just sophomores. So they really expect to be there. And I would not be shocked. I think semifinals at worst, and especially with a schedule that's relatively easy. I think if they're not in the semifinals this season, at least it's a failure. And if they're not in the title game, I think it's kind of a disappointment. So pretty high expectations. And I certainly think they're talented enough and well coached enough and deep enough to do it. It just depends on if they can stay healthy and obviously if they can execute up to their potential.
New Mexico obviously does not have very similar expectations in Bronco Mendenhall's first year. And I'll close on this. And I don't mean to put you on the spot because this is directed towards a more UNM-centric audience. But I did read your pick on 406 MT Sports. You picked Montana State 35, New Mexico 20. What's the rationale behind that pick, and why will Montana State win the game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel less and less confident the more like we talk about these teams, and especially New Mexico just being so unknown with what they have. So with Montana State just having so many questions on their own right, even though they are really talented. I think, Montana State they're cohesive, even though they've lost some guys. They've got so much high end talent, like we talked about with Malat and Greeby, and they're so dynamic on offense. I think the defense is going to be a little improved, and they're not really that banged up on defense other than the free safety spot. And I just think they're just a really good team that, is hungry for an FBS win, is hungry to kind of get some redemption from last season. Again, they almost won an FBS game a couple years ago against Wyoming. And I think a lot of the guys who are still there want to, amend, kind of avenge that a little bit. So they have the motivation. And again, I mean, it's not really a slight on New Mexico. I just have no clue. And, the betting lines have MSU as like around a 10-point favorite. So I just went a little higher than that. I remember in the press conference of Mendenhall, I think it was you who brought up the Richmond win over Virginia in Mendenhall's first year there. And that was 37-20. And I didn't, even know about that till I heard about that. But I think maybe something like that could be what we're looking at here, where Mendenhall just, is still, and he didn't sound very certain about his team either. So I think, there's going to be some growing pains on New Mexico's side trying to, fit all these new guys. And I think Montana State is just, again, has all the pieces to get a relatively commanding or demanding, FBS win.
Yeah, and, I'll speak to that kind of press conference a little bit too. I mean, Broncos usually had a pretty straightforward and honest tone on a lot of stuff, and I think it was the same on Monday as well. But it was interesting, the kind of I don't think you hear a lot of coaches kind of come out and say, like, hey, well, we haven't played the game yet, and but no matter what, it's not going to define our season, whether we win or lose and all that. So, yeah, I completely I'm with you entirely in terms of the uncertainty, and I cover the team. So I guess we'll find out together. But Victor, I really appreciate you coming on today. For anybody else that enjoyed this conversation, you can read him on 406mtsports.com. He does a great job covering Montana State. Victor, is there anything else you'd like to add, man?
No. Excited to get down to Albuquerque. Never been, so looking forward to that. Doesn't look like it's going to be too hot, so appreciate that and excited to see the stadium, see the game, and get the football season started.
All right, Victor, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.